So we're all at Comic-Con because we're all fans, and that includes the authors on this stage. Who are some of the authors who turned you into fans or inspired you to become writers?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Robin McKinley was a huge influence growing up. I read everything she wrote. I was a huge fan of especially the Damar books, like The Hero and the Crown and The Blue Sword. And you put an Easter egg in Uprooted, I remember, of The Hero and the Crown, because I read it and I was like, yes, yeah. So it was a huge influence on me, Robin McKinley.
Yeah, I mean, up for me too. I have to say Ursula Le Guin, who we so badly lost, which feels wrong. Like I expected her to be immortal, and
she is. She is.
And I also would say Tamora Pierce.
Yeah.
Alana.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yes.
For the more traditional, I discovered The Lord of the Rings when I was 13, and for many years I would reread it every year. Tolkien just blew my mind wide open. In an actual concrete sense, Catherine Kurtz's Durini books, when I read them, I remember by the end of the book I was like, I don't want to just read books like this and feel this way. I want to write books like this and make other people feel the way that I feel. So pretty big influence.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Pierce. I wrote before, but
Sylvain, use your microphone when you say that.
I wrote my first novel for fun, really. So I had no hope of doing anything with it. And then this article came out about him, just like getting like the movie deal and the 3-book deal and whatnot. And I was like, this is gonna be insane. This is nuts. This is crazy. And somehow a year later,
that movie was great, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mine too. And we ended up with the same publisher. I think we share a movie.
We share a lot of things, Sylvain. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so my most formative authors were the ones that made me go, oh my God, you're allowed to do that in books. So it was like Richard Adams with Watership Down. Oh my God, you can have a deep book about murderous rabbits. And then Jean Al with Clan of the Cave Bear. Oh my God, a woman can be the hero of the story. And then Diana Gabaldon with Outlander. Oh my God, you can have a romance book that's super deep. And then lastly, Charlene Harris. Oh my God, you can put vampires in Louisiana.
The person who kind of got me into reading fantasy period was Alan Dean Foster, and he's somebody who's got 124 novels to his name at this point, and he's still writing. And if you read the Pip and Flinks books, and you see a redheaded kid with a connection to his mini dragon, and they get in lots of adventures together, a lot of trouble, then you might see a slight parallel to something I wrote. And so he's very formative for me, and he writes science fiction as well. So I remember growing up in the 80s that basically whenever I went down to the bookstore, I would always look for Alan Dean Foster because he wrote a lot of books, and I could usually go ahead and get something new by him and know that whatever I picked up I was going to love.
I would have to say Mary Shelley, one, because she melded myth, science, and horror. And I always look at the modern Prometheus or Frankenstein as a touchstone of melding of genres, and I think that's something that has always appealed to me as a writer. And also, probably right after her would be Bernard Cornwell. He writes military history, and he's one of my favorites. And I had this really, really terrible job, and I just audiobooked 24 of the Richard Sharp books, and it saved my life. And it was also like he kind of taught me a new method of writing, which is very, very kinetic. And I suppose the third is Gene Wolfe, who I see as has no equal, right? Yeah. When Neil Gaiman says that he's happy Gene Wolfe exists because it means he doesn't have to pave new ground, the guy can write. So.
So we're all geeky about a lot of things. Do you have any personal interests or passions that have made its way into your books? So Delilah and Kevin, cheese counts.
Whiskey. So I put my favorite whiskey in my book as one of my characters' favorite whiskey, so that I get gifted it every now and then, and it worked. And to be honest, I'm pretty proud of myself for that move. So that's one of the quirks. Yeah.
I have to remember that. That's
Oh my God, that's a great move.
I get that too.
It's Lagavulin. Sorry, buddy.
No, I get Irish whiskey given to me every so often at my sightings as well. And it is truly like the best product placement you can possibly give yourself in a book, you know. Right, exactly. In terms of interest, though, let me come back to that. Somebody else. Yeah.
I like a lot. I mean, I like a lot of stuff is not a real unique thing to say, but I stuff a lot of things in my books. Like I have this comic called Lady Castle, and it's got like Hamilton references and Prince references, and it. But like my Wake of Vulture series is about like riding horses, so I plotted out a lot of the books while I was on trail rides. Was inspired on the trail rides. I took flying trapeze lessons so I could write about trapezes. So like anything I want to do, I'll be like, you know how I could make this tax deductible?
Actually, I'm a tree hugger, a literal one, and I remember being out here walking along with Tricia along the dockside here, and there was a tree I'd never seen before. I'm like, that's unusual, and it was so unusual that when I hugged it, like this white powdery substance was all over me. It was like a defense mechanism against tree huggers. And so, of course, I write a druid, and he's very concerned with the environment and everything, but I never expected to be a victim of a powdery tree. It looked like I just dove into cocaine.
Are you 100% sure it was a tree? In our defense, we did tequila shots last night, so.
I feel like you need to read the back of your name card again.
Yes.
There's a line.
Speaking for Kevin loves dogs more than anybody I've ever seen. Like, you could be like, Kevin, look, there's $1 million. And he'll be like, there's a corgi. So, like.
There is a corgi. Where's the corgi?
There's the corgi.
Yes.
But the Iron Druid books, like, your dogs are so good.
I got one of my characters to open a toy store at the end of the series, just because I have my priorities straight, and at some point there had to be a toy store. But I also created some dude in the middle of it who just tells stories out of the blue. And so I get to like shove these random things. So I have squirrel stories and axolotl stories in my books that I can just.
That's a good word.
An axolotl is fantastic. It's a cute little lizard thing. I love it.
Amphibian.
Yeah. Oh. It's an amphibian. Yeah. Mine has tiny legs. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so yeah, I'll throw in everything I like in my books. I don't care.
I was very into singing and songwriting, and my very first original novel, I made a character who was a bard, and I got to write stories about the mythology of the world and the legends and some of the songs that she got to sing. So.
I guess, I do like to put in little Easter eggs in my books that are references to like fandoms that I'm in or things like books that I've loved. So I like to hide those in there and see, and every so often people are like, is that?
And then you find it and feel really proud of yourself.
But I guess the things that I'm geeky about are like, I'm geeky about like Transformers and Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't quite fit into my books. So I haven't yet figured out how to make my Dwarven Forge collection tax deductible, sadly.
But you took it to this con where you're gonna use it, tax it up that thing. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I'll have to see if my accountants will let me get away with that.
I lived in Moscow for 2 years. I love like traveling and languages, and love Russian literature. And so I wrote a book set in Russia based on a Russian fairy tale. So it was quite connected. I was a horse crazy child. So in this book there is a magic horse that talks to the heroine. Yeah. And that horse is a gift to my 12-year-old self who wanted a magic horse. He'd talk to me so badly.
Companions.
Exactly.
Valdemar.
The world needs more magic horses. I'm just saying that. Like, not like My Little Pony, but more like tall, like majestic.
But also My Little Pony.
And that too.
Yeah.
All right. It's a big world. Pardon? And unicorns.
Yeah.
And
All kinds of
Pegasus.
horses.
I shouldn't have flapped. That was weird.
So let's talk about craft and process a little bit. There's so much writing advice out there, and we've all heard a lot of the rules. Show, don't tell, write what you know, adverbs are evil. Are there any rules that you're particularly fond of breaking? Pierce, we'll start with you.
Rules that I'm fond of breaking. Yeah, the second book in the series has to suck.
Yes. Yes.
And so I like archetypes. I embrace them because I think that archetypes are interesting because we can. In many ways, they're a touchstone for us when we're reading science fiction or fantasy. An archetype is something that we can process because it goes to a lot of our understanding of either the subject matter, or if we're going back to classic Dungeons and Dragons, the typical makeup of a party, right? And so I like breaking those conventions within a individual party. So you have your healer, you have your tanks, you have your rogues, you have your AOE or damage dealers or whatever. Sorry, I can get really deep in this, but the point is the conventions I like breaking is inverting expectations on an archetype, and I think that is really important for my series, particularly because I have a trilogy and another trilogy, and trilogies are archetypal in its own way. You can understand them because that is the modern medium by which many of these epic stories are told. And so I think it is my duty, and it is incumbent upon me, is to be inspired by older things, but then to invert the expectations of those. So I guess I suppose the structure, as well as the structure of groups.
I wrote an epic fantasy with 11 different first-person points of view. Yeah, and the sequel's going to have 12. Yeah. Oh, I did. Yeah, I've got more coming, and I am fascinated by voice and linguistic structures and how those reveal people's character and their cultures. And I had never seen that done before, so it was a mountain I wanted to climb to see if I could. And so that's what I've been really enjoying, and I get to go back to write that second book with the 12 points of view after I get done promoting Kill the Farm Boy. And that's what I'll be working on the rest of the year. So. I just wanted to bring the experience of having a bard tell his story to the audience every night, the way Homer was supposed to have done, into the prose format, to see if I could do it, because I taught it for many years. So that's basically what I guess that I don't know if there was a rule about don't do 11 first-person points of view, but if it's a rule, okay, so that's the one I broke.
There's a reason people don't do it all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
Tricia, what was your opinion when he said he wanted to do 11 POVs? Tricia's his editor, by the way.
Yeah, Tricia. I gave her a third.
And now you're on the spot
No,
right
but then
now.
I read it, and he pulled it off, and it was amazing. Like, because sometimes, like,
answer. I wanted the initial emotion.
I gave her 13. I gave her 13 when I turned it in, and she
it
made
was
me get rid
13.
of
I
two.
did make him cut 2 of them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a rule so much, but I have a friend who was like, you should never write a book with another author. It's crazy. Yeah, he was like, it was the worst experience of my life. It's crazy. And so I was like, I'm doing it anyway. And it worked out so well because Kevin and I wrote Kill the Farm Boy together, and it's been a joy. Like, we haven't had any kind of like strife or friction or annoyance. We just go to New Orleans and drink our way through plotting a story, and it's fantastic. So.
They like actually do, like they're at the bar with their notebook like between them, like giggling and just like making puns back and forth. I have watched them do it, and the puns get like more and more and more like sort of like out there, and they write them down, like themed puns, right? So like all kinds of things.
We named an elf Dribble Sprig.
Yes.
And it's in the morning wood.
There should be like y'all should have a TV show about writing a book together, because y'all are hilarious.
There is a lot of giggling involved.
So much giggling. Like not like guffawing, like it's like tee-hee. Like y'all are really cute.
Mostly from Kevin, right?
I wrote 80,000 words of dialogue where I never introduce who's speaking, and I have a prologue and an epilogue. So I'm not a rule guy, really. The one that really gets me though is Show Don't Tell, because it's like it's such a, I don't know, Charlie J. Anders said, there are no rules, but this one in particular I think is the most absurd one.
And it's like the most common one too.
I know,
Yeah.
but it's a friggin' book. If you could show, it would be a TV show. Whatever you're gonna tell. And you can tell it directly or indirectly, and you could say the moon is shining, or you could say there is a glint of light on the broken glass, and that is the indirect way of saying it. But if somehow that glint of light on the broken glass was like a plot point, and I had a character blinded by it, and he gets shot because of it, and you would actually say this indirectly, you could actually go to the moon is shining as the indirect way of getting to what you're doing. I mean, it's an absurd rule. It's a book.
I mean,
Tell us how you really feel.
He's Quebecois.
But is it a lizard or an amphibian?
Friggin' Chekhov.
Well, thank you, Sylvain, for stealing my thunder, because that prologue is what I am actually kind of known for. And it's only until very recently that I heard people say, oh, you'll never do a prologue. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I got your prologue right here. And generally, it involves a murder, and often of the poor, unfortunate character whose prologue it is. So there you have it.
I think we should have two prologues. Like
Prologue.
prologue 1 and prologue 2.
my
We have a
second
book with two epilogues.
my second book.
11.
No, my second book, it was written, and my editor's like, you know what this needs? A prologue. She said that to me, and I was like, oh, a prologue, okay, and I wrote one. So
I mean, that's a legend, Jen Hershey speaking. So
she's a legend. She's actually a legend.
We are prologue.
We are pro prologue. I also, do you want to go, or should I just
Go
finish
for
it?
it. Keep going.
They also say, don't start your book with the weather, it was dark and stormy night is not okay. All three of my books start with a weather sentence, which is fine. It's I don't know, it's fine. Also, I shift points of view within chapters very, quickly, which is also fine. I mean, I don't know. If it's comprehensible, I don't see why you shouldn't do it. So those are my two. Yeah.
I think probably the number one thing is not doing something that's been done, which I think is silly, because ultimately everything can be reduced down to something that's been done, and execution is everything. That no matter how often an idea has been done, it's not. It's not whether nobody's done your idea before. It's whether you do it yourself, and if you inhabit it, and if you sort of bring it through yourself, then it's going to be original and new.
Yeah, I feel like every rule's been successfully broken by someone. Everything has been tried.
I will say there's one rule. You have to
Right.
finish what you start.
Yes.
Right, you have to finish. If you don't
Yes.
finish, you can't publish
Who
it.
was it? Terry Brooks was saying he had a character die mid-sentence and ended his sentence on a dangling participle or whatever, and his audience was like, you didn't finish your book, there's a mistake.
People would
I found a
write
mistake.
into the authors and to the bookstores and be like, I want a new book.
I have a defective book.
defective book. Stopped in the middle of the
That was a thing, yeah.
So maybe don't do that.
Don't do that.
Your publisher will be
Finish your sentence when you finish your book.
To be fair, you can end it with.
So
Wait, Delilah, what was that, Delilah?
Was that a participle though?
It's onomatopoeia.
before we get to fan questions, Sylvain has a public service announcement.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
These are whose. This
Speaking
is
of
the unicorn
magnificent
shame.
horses.
It is mine because I got the worst score in a quiz show panel yesterday. Andy Weir got 33 points. You got what, 20?
170?
Maybe. I got 1. And I it is now mine to wear forever, and I really hate it. I want to get rid of it. So I have this deal. One of you takes it. The deal is you put it on, I take a picture, and then you leave with it, and I will never see it again. That is the deal. If you see me ever in another, anywhere, I will never see that thing again. That is a pact that we are making. And in exchange, I will give $50 to a charity right now.
Aww. Yay!
Take it away.
Yay.
He's being like brandished at me in a
Hands
very
going up.
And the rest of us will give you $60
So,
if he
I'm
sees
for
it again. You want to go up?
Pierce wore it too, and
Sam Sykes, unfortunately.
Sam
But
Sykes,
yeah.
You are getting so much quality DNA with this purchase.
It's true.
I mean, I will say in our defense, it smelled that way before we tried it on.
But we made it smell different.
So we have hands.
Hey, Sylvain, what about the kid?
Unicorns.
He's an athlete. That's his hashtag. He dresses up as a unicorn sometimes.
All right.
All right, you win.
Yes. Yes.
Hands up. All right.
We have to like a wrap off or something.
I will. So put this on. I will put the boots on you.
You have to look out through the nostrils, which is kind of weird. There's no eye holes.
And if you're wondering, it is possible to drink with that on. You just need a straw. Preferably a bamboo straw because we're earth conscious here because you're a unicorn.
I'm just saying, you're a very good wife. Your
Yeah.
husband needs to appreciate it.
Yeah, your husband needs to be really happy about this.
P.S. You
That thing is
look really
heinous.
adorable right now.
It's really, really heinous. No.
She's like quivering. Yeah.
Smile.
Oh my god.
The best thing is the vein.
So we have some time for fan questions.
It's all downhill though. I mean,
Does anybody have a question? Hi. In front.
it's a clear substance.
Yeah.
Open.
It is 7, so we're good. We can drink whatever in these bottles. Yeah.
So yeah, in front.
My question to all the authors on the panel is, I was kind of wondering, because like, all of your covers of your books are so interesting, and I absolutely love book covers. Like, Katherine, yours are just outstanding. Your book is just gorgeous.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering how much input you get into the covers of your book, or what the relationship is between you and the designer, the illustrators, and things like that.
I can take it. Sure. Generally, at least for me, they suggest like either a concept or like they show me a sample cover and I give feedback. And Del Rey's been awesome about like listening to feedback and adjusting the cover. Like they're really, really responsive and great about making sure that I'm happy with my covers. For me personally, the cover of my third book was my idea. It was the only book where it was kind of like the idea I had that became the cover. The other two, there were ideas like suggested to me and I was like, yes, great, go. But I'm proud of the third book cover because it was like my notion. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I do feel like Del Rey is particularly good,
Super good.
in terms of being responsive to any thoughts about covers, and suggestions. And, I mean, I feel like when you read publishing contracts, there's all sorts of like draconian language, like, no, they can put it out with like a paper sack and put your loose pages in a bag and hand it out, right? But in practice, they actually take a lot of input. And
Yeah,
are
they really
amazing
do.
to-
I've been publishing probably longer than anybody else on the panel, and I have to say this is a recent development because when I started, you found out what it was like when they mailed the book to you, and you certainly weren't asked your opinion, and you didn't offer it. So recently that trend seems to be changing, and Del Rey has always been pretty awesome about it. Most of what I do is media tie-in work, so a lot of times that comes from the licensor. I mean, that comes from the IP. For instance, this one was a lot of the input was from Blizzard on it as well as from Del Rey. So that brings yet another person into the mix. But it is really nice because we don't get a lot of input on things. People seem to think that authors have a lot of input, and it's like, the marketing people do that because, marketing people know marketing and we know writing. So I'm just as happy to have other people with a little bit more experience in that take care of it.
Out of curiosity, what was your worst cover? 50 books.
Worst cover?
Yeah,
Oh,
you have to have
God.
a good one.
Okay, I won't say what the book was, but sadly it was one of my originals. It's actually, well, okay, years have passed. It was actually my first original novel to be published, and I was so excited about it. And they were like, and this was back when they were talking about, people would do beautiful oil paintings and stuff, and they would show the character. And I was like, oh, we could have this character, she's being chased, and have her sitting on her horse and holding the loot that she's being pursued for, looking over her shoulder. And they're like, no, we're doing something special for your book. And I went, oh. And they had this close-up of the loot, and it had art of like, there's a monk in the book, and he's like a medieval monk. Well, somebody thought he was a Buddhist monk. And he was supposed to be holding a lantern to guide your way, and they had him holding a glowing rock that looked like a lump of cheese. And everything was brown. The loot was brown. The background was brown. It was just brown. And he was like, I have no idea what this book is about other than the color brown. And years later, there was a book out called The Green Rider, and I was just about ready to die because that was the idea I had for my cover. Oh. And I was just like, no. So that was the worst, and thankfully, most of them have been a lot better than that. So this one in particular, I'm very fond of. So.
I was going to self-publish this thing before my life got crazy in like one insane month. And if you've read the book, the first image that comes to mind for the cover is a little girl in the palm of a giant metal hand. That's what you want. You try to do it, and it doesn't work, and you try it in different ways, and it's ugly, and it like. Then you see, well, how about the view from the hole where she's in with the hand and whatever. So I went through all that and ended up doing something completely different in the end because what I wanted didn't work. And so Del Rey bought the book, and they tried a little girl in the palm of a hand, and it didn't work, and it wasn't really good. And then I met my editor, and Mark said, we have this thing where there's the view from the hole, but I don't really like it. I'm like, hey, I've been there. Yeah. And eventually, they found this dude who makes like steampunk, weird, cool things, and I got holes in my covers. And it is the greatest cover I've ever seen. I love these covers. It was really lucky, but I have nothing to do with it whatsoever. I've done the sailing part. Did as well.
Do we have any other questions? Hi, right here.
So there are a couple of books with cute animal sidekicks that they talk or they have conversations. So which one would be yours, and what would be their personality?
Mine would be an Irish wolfhound named Oberon.
Mine would be a giant bay horse that talks to me, like in my book.
I mean, I'm taking a dragon. Sorry.
Damn it.
I don't know if it's small and cute. I mean,
no, you want to fly on it, right?
No,
you don't.
It's
okay.
gonna be a large. It'll be a large. It starts small and cute, and then it grows.
I'd have a griffin with a real chip on its shoulder.
Oh my God.
I fed this little guy leftover tacos on Thursday, and he's like never left my shoulder since. So I don't know. I'm keeping him.
Wait, Sylvain, it wouldn't be a porg, because you and porgs are a thing.
No, I know. Now I have Buddy.
Now you have Buddy. You have a
name singing Buddy.
Uh-huh.
Buddy for short.
Oh,
well, you are Quebecois, so.
You are Quebecois. Yeah. Wait, you abandoned your porgs?
Yes.
You're fickle. Mm.
They're over on the street corner, like begging for scraps.
What happened to Forever Home?
Adopt, don't shop, Sylvain. I would want like a talking, wisecracking war hippo, like yes. Yeah.
I'd really like a capybara. You know how chill they are?
Yeah.
We would just be relaxed all the time. It would be awesome.
I would like a really intoxicated stegosaurus.
I feel like you'd like that for a very short amount of time.
5 minutes.
I'm not saying it would be like a wonderful relationship, but it would definitely be interesting.
For a short
So you're
amount
saying
of
you would
time.
abuse the stegosaurus?
What's that?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like you're going to be mean to the stegosaurus.
Well, I'll trade him in for the rhinoceros, right? You know what I mean.
So speaking of animal companions, the one with the corgi companion.
No.
Has there ever been a genre that you've been a little apprehensive to try to
Erotic fiction. Apprehensive isn't quite the word, but when it's 2 o'clock at night, you never know. No, seriously, historical fiction, mostly because I don't know if my research is up to snuff, and I'm a little bit intimidated because I know I'm going to get a lot of emails. And, right now, my good excuse is, well, when you make a world, you can create any BS you want to, excuse anything as long as it coherently works. Not the case when you're doing historical fiction. So that's intimidating, yeah. But erotic historical fiction in particular. Coming for you, Diana Gabaldon.
Erotic drunk stegosaurus fiction.
Now you're like fighting with Chuck Tingle, and I feel like that's just,
Oh my
I
god.
just want some saber-tooth action with that stegosaurus.
Oh my god! Great artist of our time.
Yes,
I'm
he is.
sorry.
Does everyone know the book covers and titles of Chuck? Yes, okay. All right. Magical. They're magical.
I probably wouldn't want to do, I would like to do a mystery, and I've done small ones, but like a really kind of hardcore kind of mystery. I would like to try that sometime, but I don't really have much of a criminal mind. I get
the
fooled by
understatement of
trees
the
when I hug
century.
them. So, that's probably what it would be. Oh, it's murder!
So I've written erotica, romance, YA, westerns, all of this stuff, but I don't think I'd be very good at Amish Christmas romance.
In all fairness, we've all tried, but it's a tough subject.
And then they held hands, not sexily.
The worst part is you can't write it on a computer, can you?
I'm done. There's always Rumspringa.
Sylvain and I got jealous of Kevin and Delilah's co-written book, and so we were like, we're next.
It's coming.
Except I write Russian fairy tales, and he writes sweet robot books. So we're gonna do a Russian robot nesting doll erotica.
But when do the Amish come in? I don't understand.
I am apprehensive, but it's coming.
We're brave. We're gonna sally forth.
Robot nesting doll erotica.
Tricia is very excited about this
I'm
idea.
ready. I've
She's-
got the contract ready
She's
right
ready.
now.
She's ready.
I've tackled so many different things, and this is a very particular thing, and this is actually because I have a story that I've wanted to tell for 20 years, and my agent is like, you need to write this book, because I want to read it, and I'm just too intimidated by it, and that is American historical fiction. I am fine with European because I'm very comfortable writing medieval books because I actually do a lot of research on actual history to do my fantasy. But American history, particularly if there are, since this is the time when there are still people living, and just the pressure of doing that right when they're within living memory is huge. So maybe one day I will get up the courage and do this book. So someday.
Oh, right there.
Two-part question. First half is for Del Rey, the second half is for the authors. First part is, with the massive influx of manuscripts you get, how do you know what to sort through and what you think can be polished and made into something that can go to market? The second half of the question is, how many manuscripts did y'all submit before y'all finally got published?
Okay. Wait, Tricia, are you going to answer the first part?
Yes. Well, at Del Rey, we only take manuscripts from agents. They're the ones who do a lot of the sifting of the slush pile. So, most of the things that come to us are already have been through an agent, and they've already gone through some edits and some polish. So it starts there.
The Bear and the Nightingale was the first manuscript I finished. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Temeraire.
That's not normal.
Yes, it's not. It's not normal. My story is also not normal, which is that I sold it on 55,000 words of Temeraire.
What?
Yeah. So, but
So she's like, I will see your finished first book and raise you an unfinished first book and sell that.
I've written fanfic for 10 years.
Well, y'all
before
are
I
just
ever tried.
obnoxious.
It was
That's
it was
too
my
successful.
hobby. Yeah. So, yeah.
I submitted 7 before I got a book. Red Rising, 6. So Red Rising was my 7th book, and I had 130 rejections from agents before I finally got Red Rising through the door. And so I'm very jealous. If I knew, I should have just not finished those books. And maybe
as far as I know, it did work out for you, though. So
Kind of. You're all right.
yeah,
this is
no
why
one.
one day I hope to be able to buy a Stegosaurus. You know.
Yes. And then get it drunk. It'll be expensive to get it drunk. A lot of whiskey.
Hounded was my 3rd book. My first 2 books were pretty awful, but I learned a lot. I could not have written anything else after that without first screwing up a lot. So.
Yeah, my first book was hot garbage. It started with the diarrhea scene. Got a lot of rejections. My second book got the agent, and then my 3rd book sold.
What was the first sentence? Onomatopoeia.
No, it was actually one of life's universal truths is that human beings weren't meant to crap standing up while wearing capri pants.
Oh my God.
How did that not sell?
So
agents like capri
rules are
pants?
meant to be
Should've
broken,
started with the weather, like
but
down
not
there.
diarrhea rule.
It was a shitty
That's
day.
the rule you don't want to break.
The clouds were churning and dark. There was a rumbling of thunder in the distance.
Can we move on?
My God, is that a lightning strike?
Why
No,
are we
it's
not moving
dot,
on?
dot.
Right, next question. Next question.
Question in the back? On the side?
Oh my God.
I'm not wearing capris.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. So in the back? Yes, you.
An author?
Why, yes.
Go on. Yeah.
So yeah, the question is, do you have an author crush?
Wait,
And have you
finish
met
your
them?
answer, Piers. You started.
Tell, don't show.
I got to meet Alan Dean Foster actually at Phoenix Comic Con a few years back, and tried not to squee at him, basically. Yeah, we got to have breakfast together, and he was telling me about his travels. He actually travels quite a bit. His routine is, I'll write a book and then I'll go to Brazil. You know, and he'll just take off, and he has these amazing experiences, and they're all very rejuvenating and kind of stoke the creative fire. Then he comes back and he writes another book, and off to Iceland. So, you know, yeah, he's awesome.
I got to meet Charlene Harris because she's a fan of my good friend Kevin Hearne. And I was sitting there with her, and we're sitting there, and she's got her pocketbook, because she's like a Texas grandma, and this guy walks up and is like, "Are you Charlene Harris?" And she's like, "Yes, I am." And he's like, "Love your books. Didn't like the TV show." And she gives him this classic Southern side eye and goes, "Thank you." And then stared at him till he walked away wearing the unicorn of shame.
All of this. I mean, really, Del Rey is a weird thing, like where it's a family. I got, you know, it's my first book, right? So my first con, I'm freaking out, I'm dying, I think the world's gonna end, and I end up on a panel with a bunch of these guys, and suddenly it's cool, they're all fantastic. And I would say one of the greatest thing that I sort of got to experience with like this working is meeting these guys every year, and like it's special. It's very special.
We love you too.
We're not going to beat him up at dinner.
We actually like him, which is why we give him a hard time about stuff, like his porgs. It's funny.
Oh, by the way, Racist Texas got $50 a minute ago.
Yay.
We talked a little bit about this last night. When you're a writer, you suddenly find yourself not reading as much because you're working on the writing. And for me, especially reading in my field feels like research or, kind of homework. And so I became a big fan of the complete opposite of medieval fantasy, which is police procedurals. And really, really loved them. And Ed McBaine was the creator of the genre as we know it today. And he was writing from like the 50s on, and he just wrote about the 87th Precinct. And I got to meet him at a signing for one of his books, and we just hung out. You know, he invited me to, there was cake, and he's like, just kind of hang out with me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he has written all these books. He has also wrote under a pen name, wrote the Blackboard Jungle, if you knew that book, wrote the screenplay for The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock movie, so I mean, really a very, very, very big name, and he was just as nice and down to earth as gracious, and he recently passed, and I am so sad, but he gave the world so many wonderful books, so many erudite things, as well as, kind of wry and sharp and blunt, like the 87th Precinct books, so that was a real thrill for me.
I mean, Ursula Le Guin was, I never got to meet her in person, but I emailed back and forth with her a little bit about Uprooted, which she blurbed. And there was a specific scene that she sort of pointed to, a specific aspect of Uprooted that she pointed to, and was sort of saying, like, I don't know, the way she sort of was like, there's something going on there. And afterwards I was like, she's right. And that influenced Spinning Silver for me. And, she was just such a generous creator, I feel like. And yeah, so I saw the stop sign, so I'm going to cut myself off.
I can answer, or just we can stop.
You can answer.
Oh, okay. Diana Gabaldon, who I have yet to meet, but I have come very close, as in like chasing her at cons, but like missing awkwardly. Dorothy Dunnett, who is no longer alive, but is a favorite author of mine, and I'm gonna embarrass her, but Naomi. I picked up the Tamara series when I was 18, and I read them all. That make it better or worse? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so with that hug, we will wrap up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.